Welcome, my name is Alex and this is my first tutorial of hopefully many. I'm an aspiring video game artist who has been using Blender ever since I started modeling, which was about 8 years ago. I normally do time lapses because I'm not the best speaker, but figured I would give teaching a shot. In this video I'm going to go over some questions I've written up and some of the important hotkeys to remember when you're modeling. The first question is, where did I start and where am I now? This is a model from 2013, so about 6 years ago, so well into when I began modeling, but still pretty early on in my opinion. It looks nice, but there's still a lot of problems with it, the main one being that it's high poly. All of these bevels create many more faces than you really need. It's also subsurfed, which just basically quadruples the face count. It's not textured, obviously, just a diffuse white material, not UV unwrapped either. It's got a lot of flat shading among it, right there. Those edges are really sharp. It also has a bunch of different parts, such as this part right here, the vector logo. Those would all probably be part of the gun in real life. And ever since then, I've been practicing my workflow, my techniques, everything, and I've gotten to this. This is a model I finished a couple of weeks ago. It looks miles better than the vector, obviously, and it's also a lot lower poly. It's just over 5,000 faces, while the vector is probably well over 200,000, which is a big difference, big difference. And it's all in things like this. Normal maps are your best friend when you're making game-ready assets. So this is just one face spanning across the entire length of the silencer. That break in geometry isn't actually a break in geometry, it's just a normal map. So are these three indent crevice things. While it does look like it's part of the geometry, it's not actually. And same thing with the grip. All of those textured, knurled bits are normal maps and not geometry, and all of this just goes into saving resources in a game engine. And these are all three separate assets with three separate textures, but this one's a 4K map, that's 2K I believe, and that's 4K. So 3 textures for pistol. I could probably put them into one map, but that's besides the point. Next question is, what is hard surface modeling? Well, hard surfaces are things like cars, armor, weapons, architectural elements, and the other, like if you aren't a hard surface modeler, you're probably going to be an organic modeler, which is things like characters, animals, and creatures, and things like that. So hard surface is like flat stuff, man-made stuff. Organic is trees, birds, stuff like that. Things that don't have like primitive shapes as much as hard surface objects do. Next question is, what's the difference between game-ready assets and high poly assets? Well, this would be considered a game-ready asset as it's low poly and doesn't need many resources to run in a game engine. And this, on the other hand, would be considered high poly just because all of the details are actual geometry, and geometry is the main thing that takes up resources in a game engine. So you want to go for this and not this. Next question is, what programs do I use? Blender is the obvious first one. I've got Screencast up here. It's free, it's open source, you can get add-ons for it. I just think it's the best 3D modeling software for beginners, and I just happened to be a beginner and found it, and I stuck with it ever since then. So, speaking of add-ons, I use a add-on called HardOps. It is a paid add-on. It's not that expensive. It's about $20. I'll leave a link in the description for it. It lets you do stuff like beveling automatically based on hard angles. So like if you have a shape like that, it will automatically bevel all of the sharp angles, and it also lets you do stuff like this, whereas if it was flat shaded and then you just chose to smooth shade it, it looks like garbage, right? But if you sharpen it, it doesn't add any extra faces and makes it look a lot nicer. Whereas if you hadn't sharpened it, most people when they're beginning would probably use loop cuts, something like that, to make it look better, and even that still has some weird shading issues. So that helps a lot when you're making low poly assets, because you just hit a button and it fixes your shading issues. Next program is Substance Painter. It's very popular, very good. I use it to texture anything I make now. It took a little bit of getting used to, but it's basically like a 3D Photoshop. It's really nice. I love it. It is on the expensive side though, so if you're a hobbyist, it's really up to you. If you're trying to make a career out of it, I think it's a must-have. It just lets you do PBR texturing with ease. Like you can just grab this and slap on a bronze armor material and it will automatically weather edges, put dirt in cavities, stuff like that. It's fantastic. So next thing is I'm just going to go over some basic hotkeys that I use in Blender. First one, I'll just go ahead and do it. X is to delete. It works in object mode and edit mode. Shift A will let you add primitive shapes, such as a cube. It lets you add text, bones to rig, empty objects to parent to, lights, really anything, cameras. Tab is to go into edit mode. Right click will select faces or edges or vertices based on what you have selected right down here. Vertices are where edges meet, and then edges are where faces meet, and faces are just faces. And E is to extrude. S will scale it, and scaling is used a lot, I'm sure you can guess. Extruding also is used a lot because it adds extra geometry, and so it adds a breaking point between that face and that face, which lets you move them separately to create more complex shapes. Another one I use a lot is adding loop cuts, and it will highlight the area that it's going to place it in. It's usually the closest edge to your mouse cursor. And then you left click to add it, and then it will follow your mouse cursor, and if you left click it will stay, but if you right click it'll go back to the center. Oops, like that. And that just adds some extra geometry. So if you already have a face sticking out over there, but then you decide I want it to curve upwards like that, then you can just add a loop cut and then move it up. Now you've got a curve. And you can also use the mouse wheel while you're adding loop cuts to change the number, and it will evenly space them out. So if you wanted 3, then you could add 3. And also Z is to go into wireframe. And so if you were to try to use paint select, which is C, it lets you left click to drag across vertices and then middle click to deselect them. If you tried to do that when you're in solid view, you would only select the front ones. But if you tried to do it while you're in wireframe, you'd get all of them. So then with more loop cuts, you can smooth out the curve a little bit more. And then if you sharpened it, now it's smooth shaded and keeps the sharp edges sharp. And then if you added bevels, then there you go. It's already looking a lot better than just that, just by doing some simple steps with HardOps. And HardOps offers a lot more than I use it for, but that's really the main stuff I use. And another thing I do a lot is mirroring. So I usually add a loop cut straight down the center like that, and that will follow it along the entire mesh. And then go into wireframe, press B for box select, and then click and drag over half of the model that's going to be symmetrical, and then delete the vertices. Then over here I would add a mirror modifier. Move it up to the top. Typically you will want your mirror modifier to be at the top and be applied first, so that it will mirror it like that and then apply the bevels, if that makes sense. Because if it applies, sometimes it can get weird if you apply bevels and then decide to mirror it. Sometimes it will just get a little funky. But yeah, for the most part I think that's it. That lets you change one half and it'll change the other side for you. C is paint select, I use that a lot. It's just easy to grab a lot of vertices with. Yeah, if there's any other hotkeys in future videos, I'll make sure to go over them. But I think for the most part that's it. So that concludes the basic intro into hard surface modeling. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed it, drop a like. If you're new, hit the subscribe button for more upcoming tutorials.